Welcome to Just One Q. I'm Dr. Melissa Horn. I hope you're enjoying the summer weather and are finding some time for rest and relaxation. Over the next few weeks, I'll be replaying some of our most popular episodes, as I also take some time off for vacation. Whether you've already heard these episodes or are just listening to them for the first time, I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Just One Q. I'm Dr. Melissa Horn, a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and advocate. In this podcast, I chat with industry experts about the latest scientific trends related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Each week, I ask one burning question tied to current events. Our goal is to leave you with the tools you need to drive change in your own life, both personally and professionally. Many of you have probably heard the term neurodiversity, and like me, you've probably gone to Google to research it. I'll admit that this is a blind spot of mine, and I'm sure I'm not alone. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of this huge topic, and really how workplaces can better support neurodiverse employees. With that being said, today's burning question: what do employers need to know to better attract and retain neurodiverse employees? To answer today's question, I'm joined by Wanda Deschamps. Hey, Wanda, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Melissa.
So Wanda's ultimate goal is to increase the participation level of members of the neurodiverse population in the workforce, with a special focus on autism, due to her own diagnosis at midlife. Prior to founding Liberty Co., Wanda enjoyed a 25-year career in the philanthropic sector, serving as a consultant for KCI Canada, a leading fundraising consultancy, as well as an institutional development leader. A champion for inclusivity, she enjoys writing under the banner of the Inclusion Revolution, a worldwide movement launched in 2018 to spearhead broader thinking about disability, especially disability employment. Wanda is also the catalyst behind the hashtag Women for Women Collective, focused on gender equality through supporting other women. Combining these two goals provides an avenue for Wanda to be an advocate for women with autism, including as a participant in research into autistic women's experience in the workplace. As a means to further help create safer and healthier workplaces, she is the co-founder of the National Day of Conversation about Sexual Harassment in the Charitable Sector. So, Wanda, my question: what do employers need to know to better attract and retain neurodiverse employees?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. This is a huge topic. It's a really important topic. And I would like to start by saying what is important for employers to know: that the neurodiverse population has so much to offer. And when we talk about neurodiversity, we have in our minds autism, as well as ADHD, dyslexia, and other different kinds of neurology. As you mentioned by reading my bio, I am most familiar with autism due to my own diagnosis at midlife, as well as the diagnosis of our two sons. So the main thing that employers really would benefit from knowing is that we have so much to offer, that it's largely an untapped community. And that's an unfortunate reality that, as you mentioned, I'm working to change. And the final thing that's important to know is that we do approach things differently. We think differently. We have a different kind of neurology from the mainstream population. And different does not mean bad. It means different. And so the upside is that we bring new approaches and new ways of thinking, ideas that might not emerge if there wasn't this kind of diversity in a group within a workforce. Mm-hmm. We do need some understanding, and we need acceptance for our differences, because they are positives when our strengths are played to.
So, Wanda, you mentioned that the neurodiverse population is an untapped resource. Could you maybe just tell our listeners how broad? Because I think when we think about disability, we often think about disability that we can see, but this is really an invisible disability. I think most folks may notice someone might be different, but they have no idea really that they may be neurodiverse.
So we're talking about a huge population. So the disability community worldwide is 1.3 billion people. Wow. And the vast majority of disabilities are invisible. And so many people have their own opinions about the term disability.
Okay.
And I will use it for our discussion today because of that context setting. So if we think of over 80% of disabilities are invisible within that
Mm-hmm.
1.3 billion, we're talking about millions and millions of people. And so, yes, when your neurology is different,
Mm-hmm.
you look the same as
Right.
everyone else. And that's why we keep coming back to understanding and acceptance. So if you look at someone and they appear the same, like any other member of the mainstream population,
Mm-hmm.
we're asking people as we learn more and more about invisible disabilities that we keep in mind, even though someone might look the same, that the neurology is different. So they think, and especially in terms of autism, we often communicate very differently.
Right.
So that we're looking for individuals to lay down their judgments and be
Mm-hmm.
open-minded. Just because someone communicates differently than you doesn't mean that there's any kind of ill intention.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they're processing and then sharing information differently. So to become specific so that people can understand, social communication is not intuitive for individuals with autism like it is for the mainstream population. So that means that we actually have to learn social communication. So I had to learn small talk. I know that
Okay.
may sound very strange, but it's true. And that is to give you an example that I really hope will help aid in understanding and acceptance.
The pandemic has changed the way that we're working. And I've read that this has been a watershed moment for the neurodiverse community in terms of the ways of working that would, I think, actually maybe suit some folks better, or that they've been fighting for. And now, that there's been this huge shift. Maybe you could speak to that a bit.
It really has been. It's been a huge shift. So basically what has taken place is that requests that disability advocates have been championing for years and were denied because they were viewed as being inconvenient, expensive, and a burden, were
Mm-hmm.
actually put in place literally overnight in March because the workforce had to move home and
Right.
work from home. So when we think of things in terms of flexibility around working hours, increased technological supports, and some shifts in terms of communication that would really help, especially members of the neurodiverse population, and within that, individuals with autism, those have happened
Mm-hmm.
because they had to happen for everyone.
Right.
And so two really important factors that we've learned from is that the immediacy with which this took place and the productivity it's enabled.
Right.
So these requests denied for so long because of so many concerns, including around productivity, were basically unfounded
Right.
because the economy has continued
Yeah.
while the workforce, and in some cases, productivity has increased.
Right.
And some large corporations are looking at not returning
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
way
There's many.
the way that business operated previously, because there's been so many gains. So yes, a watershed moment for the disability community and especially the neurodiverse population. And we are really encouraged. And we realize, though, in saying that, we can't take our hand off the wheel for a second. We
Absolutely.
need to
Yeah.
continue the advocacy to really ensure that the momentum that we have is maintained and sustained.
Absolutely. It's interesting the way that we think about inclusivity. And often there's this idea that we have to make accommodations for one person, or that this person, in order to fit into the workplace, they need to change. And what remote work has really shown right now is that when we make the workplace work for everyone, we all benefit. I think that that's a really interesting takeaway we need to change. It's making the workplace inclusive for all.
If we allow people to turn up, when I say turn up, whether that's
Yeah.
turn up virtually or as their authentic selves, they are happier and more productive. And therefore, overall, the workplace is more productive, the economy is more robust. And this is something that, again, so many have been advocating for so long, but COVID has really put a spotlight on it. And it's furthering the inclusion revolution.
Great teams fuel great business. In the office, on the road, in the field, and around the world, your people are working together to make it happen, to make something new, to do something better, to delight customers again and again. At Dialectic, we believe that even the best teams can get better. Dialectic is a learning company obsessed with helping teams reach their potential. Using person-centered, empathetic design and social science research methods, we build digital and in-person training that helps your people build habits that unlock enthusiastic collaboration and true belonging. For example, Learning Snippets is a diversity, equity, and inclusion microlearning program that helps your people build inclusive habits in 3 minutes or less. Your team can practice living your organization's values with off-the-shelf programs like inclusive leadership, gender identity, or offsetting racial bias. Or let Dialectic design a solution tailored to your needs, from digital transformation and difficult conversations to disaster preparedness or design thinking. Learn more about how Dialectic could help unlock your team's potential at dialectic.solutions. And if you want to see how Learning Snippets puts DEI concepts into action, you'll find the link in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Yeah, so you've mentioned that, the inclusion revolution. So I'm just thinking about what employers could sort of take away from this. You've mentioned increasing your understanding and awareness. Now, what about in terms of, because I think neurodiversity is still a really new idea for many folks, what do people need to do to make sure that they're being inclusive? Or you mentioned that this is a hugely untapped population. So what are things that they could do to attract and retain their employees?
Well, you hit on something that's really important, and that is disability is a dimension of diversity.
Right.
So, along with race and ethnicity and sexual orientation and other aspects of identity is disability.
Right.
So, it is a shift. It is doable, though. So, yes, in terms of what employers can do, education and awareness, paramount. So follow the inclusion revolution, the hashtag. Become familiar with the Valuable 500, founded by Caroline Casey and Paul Pullman. And that's about bringing on side 500 of the world's largest companies with a commitment that disability is added to the agenda of the highest levels of the organization. And from that will be a practice of building disability into all diversity programs, and that includes hiring. But beyond hiring and recruiting, there's retention.
Right.
So that's ongoing education and training, and knowing that individuals with disabilities are perhaps going to approach things differently in the workplace. Again, it's not bad, it's different. And if we play to individual strengths, like in any case, we know that individuals will be so much more productive. To make this definitely understandable for folks. So I'm talking about within jurisdictions, things that are really helpful, of course, are being aware of labor legislation, of course, in Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but then specific policies within the workplace to really know and understand what are employers to be held to account by, what standards, responsibilities, and what are employees' rights. So this is really, really important and is only becoming more important. And then again, to drill down, bring on side individuals who have the knowledge and the training and the awareness for disability in the workplace generally, neurodiversity specifically, and what can a program that includes neurodiversity within disability employment really look like. And again, it's beyond recruitment and hiring. It's then once you've ensured that you have a diverse workforce and you have representation across all forms of identity, what does this mean in terms of retaining your talent? And you mentioned the word inclusive, and it's very much that, ensuring that in the long term, you have an inclusive workforce.
Wow. I could keep talking to you forever about this because obviously there's so much that I don't know, and you're just wonderful to speak to. I want to sort of just recap for our listeners the important points that you just mentioned, and really making sure when we're looking at inclusivity, it's across all spectrums of identity, including neurodiversity. And so looking not only at your obligations in terms of the broader legislation, but then also reviewing your internal policies. And then looking at your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and that, to use the term disability, that disability needs to be a part of your diversity agenda. And if it's not, then it's time to start. And then in terms of supporting and attracting and retaining, really the important thing, retaining neurodiverse talent, is looking at how are you recruiting? And then what do your policies look like? How are you making sure that your workplace is inclusive for all your employees? So it's fantastic. And I think it's an awesome place to start for folks. Wanda, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise. And you mentioned that we're really just sort of at the beginning of starting to include neurodiverse employees into our DEI strategies and practices. And so if you are an employer who's just beginning this important work at your company, and if you want to better support, attract, and retain neurodiverse talent and make sure your hiring practices are inclusive, you can reach out to Wanda at libertyco.ca. Thanks again for joining me on Just One Q. If you have any of your own burning questions, feel free to reach out to hello@learningsnippets.ca and write us a review to let us know about what you thought of today's episode. Until next time, I'm Dr. Melissa Horn, and this has been Just One Q.